Hi guys, this is gsn.com and I'm here with a budget phone, the Vivo Y20s. It's not every day that we test a handset which is priced at around $150. Now this device was launched in late 2020 and we have it here for a test session. Actually, we already tested it. It's time to reveal some impressions about it. Okay, so first of all, this is a triple camera phone with a plastic body which has a big battery as a selling point, and it's not just the battery that's big, it's also the battery life. The interesting thing about it is the fact that it actually received Android 11 just before the unboxing, so it's one of the select few devices with a low price and this version of Android. Now let's start the review and let's start with the design. Obviously, as I said before, it's made of plastic side and frame and plastic backside, but a pretty good looking one. It goes from a basically purple to a light blue and catches the light in an interesting fashion, somehow reminding me of the Huawei P20 Lite or the P30 Lite. The camera protrudes a bit, as you can see, and it has a pretty interesting ring around it. Now the back side here draws fingerprints and grease, so you'd better use a case for it. The device is also slightly slippery, I have to say that, on account of being, well, slightly rounded on the edges. Now it's reasonably well built, I'll give it that much, and it adopts the teardrop notch at the top side, a pretty big chin at the bottom, and I would say comfy buttons on the side. Okay, now if you want measurements, it's 8.4 millimeters in thickness and it weighs 192.3 grams, with the weight being pretty decently distributed. As far as the screen is concerned, what you're seeing right here is an IPS LCD, which is good news, a 6.51-inch screen with a resolution of 1600 over 720 pixels. So it's basically an HD plus screen, which we're getting here. Now, it has a 20:9 aspect ratio and a big chin and a teardrop notch, as I mentioned before. I think it's time to see what video playback looks like. Okay, so first of all, it doesn't bother me, neither the chin nor the teardrop notch, so there's that. I have to say that for such a low price, we're getting a pretty solid screen, to be honest. The colors are okay, they're pretty well calibrated. The view angles are not half bad. Even though the image gets a bit darker, you can still tell what's happening on the screen. The contrast was pretty decent in the sunlight and the brightness is just okay. So for a budget phone, the screen delivers so far. Perhaps even more than expected, other companies would have put a modest TFT screen here. The pixels have an RGB stripes arrangement and we did a brightness test and achieved 385 lux units. Usually 400 is enough to appease us, but this is pretty close. We are above the Poco X3 NFC and above the Realme 6, which are contenders in pretty much the same department. We're below the Oppo A72 and the Xiaomi Redmi Note 8 Pro, as well as the Huawei P40 Lite. If you want to tweak the experience further, you got a set of settings here, and you're going to go to display and brightness. You got your brightness level, adaptive brightness, eye protection, dark theme, and perhaps the most useful one, color temperature, with a slider which goes from cooler to warmer. That's about it screen-wise, and now we go to the bowels of the phone when we find a Qualcomm Snapdragon CPU. In spite of what it says here, it's actually a Qualcomm Snapdragon 460 processor, 11 nanometer octa-core, also seen on the Motorola Moto G10, the OnePlus Nord N100 and Nokia 3.4. Aside from that, we have 4 gigs of RAM, which should keep the device afloat for a while, and 128 gigabytes of storage plus microUSB. Now, there's no actual lag here when it comes to day-to-day usage. I'm talking about your browsing, your scrolling, your YouTube and your Facebook. However, if you're planning on running games, stick to platformers. That's all I can say. We also did a bunch of benchmarks, so let's see how those panned out. We go here to benchmark. We start off with Antutu 8. We're just a smidge above Xiaomi Redmi Note 7 and a Nokia 6.2, and at the same time we're below the Samsung Galaxy A41, below the Oppo A72 and the Huawei P Smart 2021. The more relevant and not yet banned Geekbench 5 shows us this result, just above the Moto G Pro from Motorola and Oppo A72, as well as beating the pretty famous Galaxy A51 from last year, staying below the Motorola Moto G8 Power, Nokia 7.2 and Xperia 10 Mark II. By the way, this is the exact equal of the Huawei P Smart 2021 score-wise. We got here 3D Mark Slingshot Extreme ES 3.1. This is the GPU benchmark. And here we're above the Moto X4 and the Moto G6 Plus, which are older phones, also above the Huawei P30 Lite. Not many new devices to compare this with. Basically, we're beating phones from 2 or 3 years ago. We're below Nokia 6.2, Galaxy A17, Motorola One Zoom. Definitely not a powerhouse in the GPU department. I would say the phone is somewhere in the area of the 2019 mid-range phones. That's where it gravitates. This comes with a bonus, the fact that we're far from overheating here. 28.4 degrees Celsius, one of the coolest phones I've ever tested. The third coolest phone in benchmarks, and in games also the third, 30.5 degrees Celsius, so it keeps its composure. When it comes to the battery, 5000 mAh with an 18 watt charge, somehow happening via microUSB. Now let's see what we achieved during our battery test. First of all, a pretty amazing video playback time of 19 hours and 13 minutes. Quite solid, I would say. This is placed on the 20th spot. It will stay there for a while. It surpassed several handsets like the Huawei Y6P, Moto G8 Power, Galaxy A71 and Xiaomi Mi A3. Not a bad company, to be honest. At the same time, it stays below the Xperia 10 Mark II, Galaxy A31 and the Moto G7 Power. Now, as far as continuous usage is concerned, we got here the result, and it's amazing. It's actually the second placed phone, and it's only beaten by a special battery phone with an 11,000 mAh battery. It's an amazing score, 18 hours and 3 minutes. It basically beats any phone you can imagine. It doubles the battery life of the Galaxy S20 Ultra, so it also beats quite a few battery phones like the Moto G7 Power, the huge OnePlus 8, Galaxy 31 and Moto G9 Power. So that's a very solid score, while the charging is, I would say, reasonable considering what we achieved here. 2 hours and 9 minutes, and after 1 hour you're at 64%, should be enough for a full day of usage without a problem. 30 minutes means 29%, I would say half a day usage, maybe even more. There's also battery saver features in case you need extra juice. Now on the acoustics front, we have a single speaker at the bottom, we also have an audio jack, and even bundled headphones. There are clones of the Apple EarPods, which have a pretty, I would say, modest experience. They're pretty rigid in the ear. Now as far as the actual experience goes for the bottom speaker, here we go. Okay, so let's get this out of the way. The sound is pretty annoying at top volume, especially the high notes. I feel that sticking at about 60 or 70% of the volume should be enough for you. If you listen to songs with very intense guitar shredding or very intense synthesizers, those may annoy you. There's not much bass here. The only thing that's good about this speaker is probably the voice and the volume, those two aspects. But try to stick to 60% volume and you should be reasonably happy with the result. The speaker won't be covered in landscape, so there's that, and once again it's quite loud. We did some tests here with our decibel meter, and let's see what came out of that. The volume power at the bottom with a typical acoustic sample is 82 decibels, which is not a very impressive result. In spite of that, it managed to beat some heavy hitters like the iPhone 11 and Xperia 5 Mark II. It stays below the Samsung Galaxy A20e and the Galaxy A31 plus Motorola One Action. In gaming, it's a whole different ball game, 103 decibels, almost cracking top 20, beating Galaxy A31 and phones like the Poco M3 and Poco X3 NFC. Stays below the Redmi 9C NFC and the Oppo A72, which did a bit better. This has been the acoustic test, and we're off to the camera. In the teardrop at the top, a modest 8 megapixel shooter, and at the back side a triple camera with a pretty generous LED flash here. The main sensor is a 13 megapixel shooter, accompanied by the classical macro 2 megapixel camera and bokeh 2 megapixel camera. You can only shoot full HD videos here, there's no 4K, there's bokeh and the portrait separated, there's a slow-mo feature and a time-lapse. Just so you know. Now we have an albums application here, which has a pretty well organized set of photos. First of all, it was a pretty cloudy day when we took these pictures, so you should remember that. the sun came through the clouds every once in a while. And these are the pictures we achieved on this day. First of all, the digital 2x zoom is actually pretty decent. It reminds me of the compliments I gave to the Huawei P30 Lite and P40 Lite in that regard. And I love the hues of yellow. Among all the colors I captured, the yellows stood out the most. The reds aren't that impressive, they tend to be a bit pink. Also the blues are just okay, so this is actually not as well calibrated as my eye perceived. I'm talking about the reds here, but the yellows are quite solid. Speaking of solid, the clarity and details are decent for a main 13 megapixel camera. Don't expect to be on par with 48 megapixel shooters, but it's okay. Here you can see definitely a lot of pink here, even though it should be red, and a few more shots. We're definitely missing the ultra wide camera, and this is an excellent bokeh or portrait shot, more bokeh I would say. The subject is pretty well cut from its background. This is not as successful, it also blurred a part of the subject. Another one, and this is an attempt at a macro, not very well succeeded. We have further ones which look a bit better, like this one here. Some of the macros we've taken are actually quite good, I have to say. This one here, but they take several attempts to perform properly. Okay, and we also have selfies. For an 8 megapixel camera on a budget phone, they're actually not that bad. However, there are many effects to get rid of. By default, you'll have a lot of effects which will modify your eyes, your jawline, your texture of your face. They will make you more beautiful and you have to deactivate them. Now, the focus is pretty okay for an 8 megapixel camera. Details are there. The face is a bit too white compared to my actual real face. It's not that white, not that ghostly. But I would say that the eyes and the general feel of the face is, well, the expression is there. It conveys the message you're trying to convey. Not a lot of details. The hair is not very well rendered here in these shots, but the eyes are the thing that stand out the most. Actually, pretty good bokeh. The way it's separated from the background is pretty solid. You'd say it was a better camera than 8 megapixels. That's the vibe I'm getting. It feels like it's a better camera than the 8 megapixels it delivers you. Okay, so these have been the selfies. We have quite a few of them, and here comes another set of colors. Once again, everything except for the reds and the blues check out. So the green is okay, the yellows are okay, and the focus is decent in close-ups, but macro takes a few attempts. And every once in a while your bokeh shots will be a bit missed, like this one here. Mickey Mouse's ear, the right one, also got a bit blurry. Okay, another attempt at a macro, one or two of them. And we have some portrait shots for a statue which was identified as a human subject, so basically portrait with the back camera. Actually not looking pretty bad, not bad at all. Nice texture and a pretty expressive face. So that's about it. In the end, I feel that this is just slightly better than the Poco M3, and at the same time it gravitates in the ballpark of let's say Huawei Y series, but just above it. Definitely better than the Redmi 9C if you want to compare it with that one, and better than the Galaxy A20e if you're going towards that route when it comes to price comparisons. This is during the daytime. Let's see during the nighttime. We don't have as many shots, but things are clear. Budget phone rarely performs in such conditions, and here we are. Now, on this small screen things may look okay, but in real life I have to say that on a bigger screen we have big halos. These are dark shots, some of them are moved and missed. They're a bit ghostly, and at the same time I would have to say that there's a bit of shakiness going on during the capture. As I said before, big halos, big light halos. The colors don't stand out very much. And as you can see, the light sources are not well interpreted here. This should have been crisper and sharper. So not much to write home about. You have to be really patient and focus properly, and maybe you'll deliver something usable for your Instagram feed. Now, this has been the photo department. Let's see the video department. I'm going to go here, and we have 10 videos. We even have a stabilization test. Of course, not expecting much. This is digital stabilization, of course. The image is quite shaky, but at least we're not losing focus, and the flicker is not that intense. Don't get me wrong, stabilization is definitely not the best in the world here. and some shakiness is felt even in the classical panning videos. This is one of the videos. The colors are a bit more intense than I would like them to be. I actually feel the need to decrease the exposure by 1 degree or 2 to get an ideal result. The sky is always white when you're filming, an intense white. In general, the top side of the image feels a bit whiter than the bottom side. Now, the swap between zoom levels is pretty fluid. That's one good thing, but the image gets pixelated pretty fast after 3x or 4x, which was to be expected. The selfie video is actually one of the best videos I shot, to be honest. Not bad. I know the face is too white, but the background isn't half bad, the focus is decent, even the stabilization, digital as it is, it's okay for $150. Not bad. The problem is that I took 3 focus tests and none of them pleased me. Autofocus isn't very snappy here. I mean, it's okay at first, but when you're trying to get close to a subject, not that easy. Actually, it had to resort to manual focus, which is pretty good in the end. So there's that. Only Full HD once again, no 4K, and this is the nighttime video. As expected, doesn't deliver much. Once again, shocked by the fact that we don't have a flickering image. But the hue is a bit reddish, at least on my monitor from my desktop PC. There's a lot of shakiness, of course, and the light halos are quite big. As you can see here, it gets very red and pretty warm, so that's about it. Didn't expect much, and once again I would say that it's maybe on par with the Huawei Y series, or beats them. If you've seen what the Poco M3 can do, this one feels like it's 5% or 10% better. This is it for the camera. Let's talk about connectivity. Now, as far as connectivity is concerned, this is a dual SIM phone which comes with 4G connectivity as well as Wi-Fi dual band. There's also Bluetooth 5.0, GPS, GLONASS, Galileo and BDS. We don't have NFC, and at the bottom you can find the microUSB 2.0 port. Now, the calls had a pretty decent clarity and volume, but they're definitely not record breakers. The good news is that we also have FM radio here. The other good news is that the speeds are actually not that bad. I'm talking about the speed of the 4G and the Wi-Fi connection. I measured them via speed test, and these are the results we achieved. The Wi-Fi one is quite impressive, 235 MB/s in download and 325 MB/s in upload. 4G is pretty decent, 126 over 63.2 MB/s in download and upload respectively. For the price we're paying, I would say we're getting along quite fine. Now, as far as the software is concerned, if you've seen our previous review of the, Vivo Y70, this one has the pretty much same experience. We got this leftmost feed for all the Google News you can want, and for multitasking you can opt for this. You got all these recent apps, and you can trigger some of them in a split screen mode, as shown here. Now, aside from that, it's a pretty clean and stock experience. I'm happy we have Android 11 here. The device just got updated once I got it out of the package. And Vivo doesn't add much bloatware, which is always good to see. And the experience is very fluid, considering the specs we're dealing with here. Now, if you swipe down, you're going to see notifications and quick settings, which are pretty similar to what Nokia has been offering for the past years, at least as far as the color choice is concerned. We go to the settings when we find, I would say, typical options for connectivity, display, lock screen, some dynamic effects, personalized animation effects. There's the system update area, battery, security. You can opt for the fingerprint scanner here, and you can also opt for face unlock. And I have to say that the fingerprint scanner is quite fast. You just saw it in action and pretty accurate. You got your permissions to set up from here. So privacy, permissions, show passwords, autofill from Google. And believe it or not, this is not a gaming phone, but it has quite a few gaming features and modes. There's a game assistant pop-up, game sidebar, an esports mode, and a variety of other options which relate to do not disturb or special sound quality effects in games. So nice to see that we have gaming options on a non-gaming phone. Digital well-being is part of the package as well, and as far as the pre-installed apps go, they're pretty basic and stock. They come from Google, and aside from Google we also have Facebook, Instagram, TikTok is pre-installed as well. There's YouTube here, there's a recorder, and the most useful one is added by Vivo, and is this one, iManager. Takes care of your resources. You can clean space, do a security scan, optimize with a single touch, check out your data usage, see the app usage management. There's the app clone and the ultra game mode, and that's that. I think we're about to the end of the review, and I think it's time we had a gander at gsmdome.com, our website, and I'm going to list the pros and cons. Now, of course, on the pro side, we have a pretty good looking back for this handset. I would also have to say that the color is quite nice. The experience is fluid. I'm talking about day-to-day use. You're browsing your Facebook, your YouTube. They happen in a pretty fluid manner. We have Android 11. The screen is quite okay, color-wise and brightness-wise. There's no overheating here for sure. The battery life is fantastic, as I showed you before. And I have to say that the main camera does its job reasonably well. We have bundled headphones. As a plus, the speaker at the bottom is loud, pretty good selfies and a pretty okay selfie video. Fast connectivity and no bloatware, those are other pluses. On the cons side, it's slightly slippery. At the same time, the speaker at the bottom can tend to get annoyingly loud at times and with a bit of distortion, not much bass, and some of the shots we've taken, some of the pictures, the hue red was turned into pink. Macros were so and so, the videos were rather shaky, and I have to say that video capture overall didn't blow me away. There's a microUSB port at the bottom, not USB-C, and we don't have NFC. In the end, there's a unique niche for this phone, which I don't think you knew existed. Okay, so aside from that, the niche of the phone is the social networking smartphone. It has a huge battery life and it can easily be used with those very power-intensive apps. I'm talking about your Instagram, Facebook, Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, TikTok. They eat a lot of battery, but that's no problem on this device because it has plenty to spare. So it's a social networking phone which can take some pretty solid selfies and decent main camera pictures. Of course, you can consume video on it without any problem because it has a lot of battery life. So battery phone for socializing and selfies. That's the identity of the Vivo Y20s, reviewed here at gsmdome.com and priced at around $150 if not less. Bye bye.